I've had this unfortunate experience myself where I picked a center that was perfect on paper, and 10 months in, I realized that they were not even meeting minimum legal requirements and I had to withdraw my child. Where I am in Australia, 77% of daycare centers are operating below minimum child safety standards, but it also means 23% of centers are not, and there is a big range when it comes to quality. Choosing a daycare center is one of the most important decisions that we have to make as parents. In this video, I'm leveraging my honest lived experience as a mother navigating a broken system, as well as my background as a corporate auditor. I'm putting together a list of 8 red flags to help you identify these subtle warning signs before it's too late. Number 1, legal child to staff ratios are not being maintained. Every major country has a legal requirement in terms of the number of educators required for the number of children. For infants under 2, it's usually a 1 to 3 children ratio or a 1 to 4 child ratio. If you are noticing consistently at drop-off on pickup that these ratios are not being maintained, if it feels chaotic to you, if the director or educators have constant excuses, that is not acceptable. That is actually a breach of the law. I had this experience where almost every single drop-off, they were not meeting minimum legal requirements, and I got a lot of excuses, something around a personal emergency of an educator, or I caught them at a bad time. But to be clear, even in the event of an emergency, they have to maintain these legally required ratios, and a good center will overstaff so they never find themselves in a situation where they are in breach. To me, this is a huge red flag because it comes down to the level of supervision and quality of care of the children. If you do not have enough supervision and enough people to monitor the children, a lot of things can go wrong. This is actually a very big root cause that can cause other red flags that we'll go through. Flag number 2, high staff turnover or a lot of casual workers, people you do not recognize. High staff turnover can indicate poor working conditions, poor pay, staff burnout, a poor culture and environment. This is actually a big red flag you should take seriously. While I do recognize a lot of staff that are in the early education space may not be choosing that as their lifelong career, if you are noticing a high amount of staff coming in and out, if people are leaving without giving any explanation, or if the explanation seems vague or poor, this can all be a big red flag. Continuity of care is so important for children to maintain that strong attachment to the educators, and your children will ultimately suffer if you have turnover that is too high. Red flag number 3, an unsettled child beyond 4 to 6 weeks transition. Now, I am not a child behavioral specialist, so I did have to reflect the research here. And based on the research, the average time to settle in is between 4 to 6 weeks. Now, that can very much differ based on your child's age, the frequency they attend childcare, as well as their temperament. The consensus among child development experts and organizations is that failure to acclimate can be an indication the child's security and attachment needs are not being met. You know your child best. And children do communicate, even if they are not speaking, they communicate in other ways. You know the difference between a few tears that drop off and they're happy and settled in within the next 5 minutes versus a child that appears to be unsettled for the majority of the day. I would be skeptical and ask a lot of questions to the educators if you do find that your child's needs are not being met. It may mean it is time to try out a new center. Frequent or unexplained incidents. Are you finding that all of a sudden your child has a big bump on their head and they have no idea what happened, or a scrape on the knee and nobody was there to actually witness what occurred? Is that a regular thing? Is there a pattern of something happening there? Unwanted behaviors as well as incidents can definitely be an indication that there is a lack of supervision. One thing that is in your right is to request any video footage of the incident as it occurs, and I would encourage you to use your rights to request that to the center if there are cameras on the premises, and find out what happens with your own eyes. I had the unfortunate experience where my child was getting bit very, very frequently, like beyond what is normal. And I did request to see the footage, and what was represented to me verbally by the educator was completely different than the evidence I saw with my own eyes. So for me, that was an indication that the trust had been eroded and it was time to move on. Number 5, the daycare hangover. This is such a common and can be very normal reaction to daycare, where at the end of a very big day, they tend to have emotions pour out. Maybe they're throwing tantrums. And when they're home with you, they are more comfortable and those emotions tend to spill out. So this can be something normal, but it can also be a red flag. And again, this is up to you as the parent who knows your child the best. I can speak from my own experience. When my child was in a daycare center that he was not well supported, we had explosive emotions at night consistently and regularly. That was out of character for him. And it was a night and day difference when I changed him into a center where his needs were being met. It was also a red flag for me that there was such a large discrepancy in how the educators at the center would describe my child versus the child I knew at home. So for example, my child is a chatterbox. They don't stop talking. And to hear that my child was very reserved and quiet and not using their voice was alarming to me as a parent. I felt that this was an indication my child did not feel safe, and that was very much validated when I changed daycares and I saw the difference in behavior. So this is another way that I do believe children communicate, even if they don't have enough words to describe really what's going on for them, and something to just be very aware of as a parent. Red flag number 6, visible care gaps. This can mean a soiled diaper rash that's really bad. Every day, if you are picking up and your child has a nappy that hasn't been changed or not applying sunscreen when they're going out. I had an experience of my child wearing another child's bib a lot of the time. To me, these are indications not that the educators are bad, but that they are completely overwhelmed and they don't have enough time to take the care that is needed for your child. Number 7, the say versus do gap. We all know that actions speak louder than words. A lot of daycares will have perfectly written policies, but in practice, they are not executing against those policies and the procedures do not align with what they are supposed to be doing. A good daycare center will be very receptive to feedback and they will action upon that quickly instead of pointing to policies that are not being enacted. This is ultimately how you build trust, as if your daycare center director is actually following up and keeping the promises they're making and actually actioning on feedback should anything occur. If you are finding that you're constantly disappointed with the actions that they are taking, this is certainly a red flag and it could mean there are underlying problems. A lack of transparency or dishonesty. A good daycare center has nothing to hide. If you are finding that they are rushing you out of there at drop off and they don't want you to stay an extra few minutes, if you request video footage when there are videos capturing an incident and that's being denied, or if you're requesting incident reports and they're not giving it to you, those are big red flags that they feel they have something to hide and they're not being transparent. If an incident happens and they scapegoat your child and make it seem like it was their fault for falling or getting hit, those are all big red flags. That comes down to the culture and the leadership of the center. The final advice that underlies all of this is listen to your gut and listen to your children. Children do communicate even if they don't have their words, but also as the parent, you know your child best. You know what is normal and not normal for your child. So pay attention to those subtle cues. Go and tour lots of centers, get lots of perspectives, interview your directors at various centers, and see if you can find somewhere that is perhaps a better fit if you are noticing that you're hitting a lot of these red flags that I outlined. I know it can be difficult on children to be uprooted and change centers, but it also builds resilience. And sometimes the best thing that you can do is move your child from an environment that may not be serving them and find somewhere that is a better fit for you, your child, and your values. Don't forget to check out my video on the 10 questions you should be asking before you enroll your child in a daycare center. These are critical due diligence questions that parents often forget. I wish you the best of luck and thanks again for watching.